So you're here with United Methodist Women for our monthly Just Energy for All webinar for members and friends seeking to put faith, hope, and love into action by learning about and advocating for just energy solutions in our communities. My name is Elizabeth Chanhe, or Liz Lee, and I serve as the Executive for Economic and Environmental Justice. And I'll be serving as your host for this webinar. And if you've just joined us, just a reminder to mute yourself for our time until the very end when we have Q&A and discussion. This is our third session on clean transportation. And I'm very excited about today's session, Women on the Move, Equity and Climate Justice in Public Transit, where we will explore the intersections between gender, race, climate justice, and public transit. We will explore issues around current transit system that specifically impact women and hear from diverse voices, from experts to lived experience expertise, and for those who are actively working to improve public transit, from the worker perspective, from communities perspective as well. And we're so excited that this is in collaboration with the Transit Equity Network. And United Methodist Women is a member of the Transit Equity Network. And we have Bakari, who's representing us, and Nancy and others who are present. And we will learn about opportunities that we have as United Methodist Women and Friends to participate nationally, virtually on February 4th, which is Transit Equity Day, in honor of Rosa Parks' birthday. And we're going to start with prayer. And Ms. Janet A. Mills will be leading us in prayer and also grounding us in our Sisterhood of Grace. She's an active member of United Methodist Women and leader, and I've met her at various times where she serves at the national level as a program advisory group member. She's from Eastern PA Conference, and she's a second generation member of the historic James Memorial UMC in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She's also a retired licensed insurance agent and a proud graduate of the oldest HBCU, Cheyney University of Pennsylvania. So Ms. Janet, thank you so much for being with us and grounding our time in prayer and setting us up for the how we are present together through the Sisterhood of Grace. Ms. Janet, you're on mute right now.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you, Marianne. Yes, I'll say good morning to our West Coast sisters and brothers and greetings to all. Let us center ourselves with the focus on our Heavenly Father today. What a wonderful day it is. Dear breath of life, our Holy Spirit, hear our prayers. We are here today to say thank you for uniting us as women, and men are here too, so that we can serve you. Lord, give us strength that we may be able to stand firm as one and fulfill the plans you have set before us. Give our superlative and unwavering leaders in our faithful organization, as well as the global crusaders and leaders on all government levels, the strength to go beyond their superpowers to encourage us to work together on your behalf to uplift your kingdom. We are ready for you to order our steps and hear the cry of those who need advocates in your word to protect our local communities and the planet. We pray for those who have lost their hope and are already facing droughts, floods, storms, unsafe water, mold, disastrous environments due to climate change, global warming, evildoers, and greed. We're praying for the growing list of endangered species that is a direct effect of climate change. We pray for the world we live in, that you may open our eyes and help us to rebuild, revitalize, and care for the wonderful gifts we have been given. We pray for our world leaders and the naysayers, that God may grant them the wisdom to realize the truth and make decisions for the longevity of the planet and our future generations. May the things that we learn today enrich, motivate, and help us to continue being women that bring glory to your holy name. May our words, thoughts, and deeds edify and align with your word. In Jesus' name, to the one who showed us how to love, we pray. Amen. Sisterhood of Grace. Listen actively with head and heart. Speak from your own experience. Be aware of body language. Respect confidentiality. Own your intentions and your impact. Practice sustainability. Expect unfinished business, both discomfort and joy.
Amen. Thank you so much, Ms. Janet, and for that prayer and inspiring us in terms of where our hope is and our direction. Our agenda for today is the following. We'll hear again from Janet. She'll provide a witness in terms of her experience and engagement with public transit. Then I'll do a little bit of framing about how transit equity and faith connect, especially as United Methodist women. What are the intersections between domestic violence and transit equity? That's something that we may not think about, but it's present in terms of how women are being impacted. Dr. Regan Patterson will speak on gender and transit. And Transit Equity Day focus on what it is and how to get involved will be led by Bakari Height and Nancy Smith. And we'll have time for Q&A and discuss next steps. So that's our time together today. And I know some of you will have questions with the different speakers. If there are particular topics that you want covered by a particular speaker, please note that in the chat box. We will be collecting those questions. We'll have our presentations and then we'll get to the questions at the very end. So I want to hand it back to Ms. Janet to speak and give her testimony.
Thank you, wonderful servant Liz. It's my pleasure to give my personal testimony. I've been on public transportation for most of my life. I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, urban area. There's two worlds in public transportation, those who live in the urban areas and those who live, let's say, 10 miles outside the city. Fortunately, by living in the city, I am able to walk maybe 1 or 2 blocks to a bus stop and transfer to another bus if I have to. It's easily accessible. For those who have to travel outside of the city, that's when the many challenges exist, particularly if that's where most of the available work is these days, is traveling to the suburban areas outside of the city, where you have to deal with infrequent connections that are not timed correctly, and they're always are overcrowded. That's one thing that needs to be addressed, is the capacity, honoring the capacity of the mode of transportation. Again, this is for those who live in the city or frequently having to deal with somebody's elbow right near them. And this, I should say, this was before the pandemic, and it's happening pretty much now as well, but not as severe. Because they are trying to honor capacity due to the pandemic. Also, we have to talk about the filth not being clean. And again, I'm speaking from my personal perspective, is that a cleaning process needs to be made there. There's elevators that are not working. And I was informed the reason they're not working is because of disposable needles and human waste are clogging the elevators. A little bit of reality there. Also, we have to walk over vulnerable people there, and that's something that is being addressed. I'm told we have an incoming CEO in charge of our transportation who has a master's degree in environmental issues, so she is directed to address some of these issues. We are worried about the fumes in the terminals, the bus terminals. We are constantly inhaling fumes and emissions, and that needs to be addressed. There are a few terminals that are strictly outdoors, but we do have terminals that are has partial roofing. That's not great ventilation. There is a concern about heating and air conditioning being controlled as well. So we want to look at what we have to deal with is the capacity issues, the cleaning issues, and how they're going to handle it after the pandemic. This is what needs to be addressed. They have a $2 billion budget. And I feel that that budget should be addressed with how to curtail some of the issues with them. And I believe we have other speakers that will scope more about the emissions and water, protecting the water use as well. But as a rider, we have to look at more frequent and buses and trains, and as well as the better connections. So that's my personal account. I'm willing to take any questions either directly to my email or after the end of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing, Janet, and really helpful in terms of your experience, right? And I think it's so important to know what our particular contexts are, right? For you, you were speaking about cleaning, cleanliness, capacity, vulnerable populations who are harmed, budget, the frequency. And so that is a reality that then you can speak to, right? That we all can, in our own context, speak to say, we need funding, we need better infrastructure, we need better support for commuters, for residents, as well as for workers and those who are working in the transportation sector as well. So thank you. And I would invite you all, as you heard Janet speak, to think about what your own experience of transit is. And it may not be at this particular precise moment, right? It might be throughout your life what that experience and journey was. So I'm going to continue now, and I want to do a little bit of framing for us around transit equity and why are we having this conversation to begin with. So United Methodist Women, one of our 2 issue priorities is climate justice, and our Just Energy for All campaign is our primary focus there. And we want to move away from unjust energy systems, fossil fuels, nuclear, that really harm God's creation, climate change, our environment. And we want to move to just energy solutions that are not only about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but really addressing environmental pollution, environmental harm, ensuring that there is actually a just energy system versus what we have currently. And that means just transition for workers and communities most impacted. Just two images right here. The one on the left is the leading cause of climate pollution and climate change is from greenhouse gas emissions. And you'll see on the right-hand side that transportation is actually the main source in the United States. And I wanted to just note that in the companion litany to our social creed within the United Methodist churches, Book of Resolutions and Book of uh, Resolutions and Discipline, it has this. And I would invite you to consider this as something that you can incorporate in your meditation as well. God and the Spirit revealed in Jesus Christ calls us by grace to be renewed in the image of our Creator, that we may be one in divine love for the world, right? Again, it's not just for ourselves. Today is a day God cares for the integrity of creation, wills the healing and wholeness of all life, weeps at the plunder of the earth's goodness, and so shall we. Today is the day God embraces all hues of humanity, delights in diversity and difference, favors solidarity, transforming strangers into friends, and so shall we. Today is a day God cries with the masses of starving people, despises growing disparity between rich and poor, demands justice for workers in the marketplace, and so shall we. And I wanted to share this litany because it embodies, I think, just a bit of what we as people of faith are called to, right? We recognize our location and our relationship with God as right relationship with creation, right relationship with one another, and that it is our reality in our communities with increase of economic disparity, and injustices towards workers as well, that is something that we as people of faith can rise up and resist and seek solutions that God calls us to. And when we think about air pollution in the United States, burning of fossil fuels, especially from transportation, is harming our communities and disproportionately harming low-wealth communities and communities of color. Highways, busy roads are located in African-American communities, Latinx communities, and certain Asian American communities and indigenous communities. I also want to note that in our book, Resolutions on the Energy Policy Statement of the United Methodist Church, it says we support increased government funding for research and development of renewable energy sources and elimination of fossil fuel subsidies. We encourage development and deployment of these technologies and government incentives to speed the application of resulting technologies to our energy needs. The greatest national and international effort should be made in the areas of conservation and renewable energy sources. So we have within our own book of resolutions around energy, guidance in what we can be advocating for. In the economic community, in the social principles, it notes, every person has a right to a job at a living wage. We support social measures that ensure the physical and mental safety of workers. We believe that persons come before profits. We deplore the selfish spirit that often pervades our economic life. We support policies that encourage the sharing of ideas in the workplace, cooperative and collective work arrangements. We support rights of workers to refuse to work in situations that endanger health and/or life without jeopardy to their jobs. We support policies that would reverse the increasing concentration of business and industry into monopolies. And thinking about the pandemic that we currently face, have been in, thinking about our transit workers and their safety as well. And what can we do as riders? And some of us who are actually in the transit system, how can we envision and advocate for just solutions, and what would those be? And so we're going to be talking about that more today. I also wanted to give the last section from the Book of Resolutions that relate to our topic and impacts on women in particular, around eradicating sexual and gender-based violence, section 3427 in the Book of Resolutions. All creation is sacred in God's sight. Because many women and children, along with others, are ignored, abused, and violated, we urge renewed commitment to prohibiting violence against women and children in all its forms. Women with equal rights are better educated, healthier, and have greater access to land, jobs, and financial resources. Because women and children, along with others, are ignored, abused, and violated, we urge renewed commitment to eradicating violence against women and children in all forms. And we'll be hearing more about some of these connections, but I did want to note that. I also noted earlier that UMW is part of the Transit Equity Network for the past few years, and we're also part of the US Climate Action Network's Vision for Equitable Climate Action. And within there, it is a group of over 100 organizations advancing climate justice. And in there, we prioritize the need of advocating for a different transit system and economy because it is so fossil fuel based at the current moment. So I just wanted to do that as some framing for us as why we as people of faith need to act. And if people in our church pews or in our UMW meetings say, why are we talking about this? There's so many biblical principles, but you can also lift up these sections of the Book of Resolutions, just to name a few. So next, we're going to hear from Shivani Parikh, and she spoke during last year's transit equity community hearings, and she really helped make the link between domestic violence and transit equity. So Marianne, if you can share that video.
New York, Shivani Parikh with the Center for Safety and Change and the New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Shivani, thank you for joining us and for sharing your story. Please take yourself off of mute and remember to speak slowly for the interpreters.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Shivani Parikh, and I am the outreach coordinator to our Asian communities at the Center for Safety and Change. The Center for Safety and Change is the only nonprofit providing shelter and services for victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault in Rockland County, New York. Rockland County is on occupied Ramapo Lenape land and a 40-minute drive north of Manhattan. We do take referrals from all over the state, New Jersey, and broadly around the country and try to refer folks to their nearest agency. Domestic violence victims generally have an increased need for accessing health services, therapeutic services, and other social services. Unfortunately, restricting or denying access to public transportation is a common tool of abusive partners to isolate especially women, femmes, and non-binary folks who are these victims and survivors from basic needs and services, as well as from their potential support networks. Public transportation, or the lack thereof, can therefore play a disproportionately influential role in the lives of these victims and survivors. We know that transportation greatly influences their sense of isolation, their experience of abuse, and their perceived ability to leave. In suburban areas, too often people are unable to walk to their nearest bus stop because they're not sure where it is because they're not well demarcated, or because they simply don't know where they are, because this information, especially in communities where there's large ranges of socioeconomic distribution of wealth, means that the people who may need these services the most may need other language services that aren't being provided when, again, leadership is predominantly white and upper middle class. For example, another way in which public transit has hindered folks in my county specifically is to think about the ways that they are paying a lot of money for or paying a lot in their time for being able to commute to places that they may need their services, especially if it's in neighboring areas. For example, to drive from our agency and to cross the bridge across the Hudson to travel to Westchester County, this would only take about 35 minutes, whereas a bus ride would take nearly 3 times longer. Similarly, the NJ Transit or New Jersey Transit is the provider for our train line from Rockland County to Manhattan. While a drive, as I said earlier, would take about 40 minutes, a train ride would take about twice as long, and a round trip ticket costs $21.50, which for many of our residents would be the equivalent of 2 hours labor if considering minimum wage post-tax. During this pandemic, hotline calls have increased by 60%, and it's become incredibly difficult for folks who are trapped with their abusers. After saying all this, I hope that it's become clear that it is critical that especially our suburban and rural victims and survivors, particularly for those who hold identities as being differently abled, low income, and generally precarious, can access affordable and efficient transit. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. And so just that clip, I think something that we may not think about all the time, right? In terms of transportation being a means for those who are facing violence and a means to for their freedom and survival as well. Next, we will have Dr. Reagan Patterson really to speak more deeply about the connections between gender and transit. I heard Dr. Patterson speak a few months ago where she was the author of We Do's Gender, Climate, and Transport brief, and it was phenomenal. I learned so much. So it's such a privilege, Dr. Reagan Patterson, to have you join us today. And just a little bit about Dr. Patterson. She's an environmental engineer and environmental justice consultant who focuses on issues related to transportation, equity, and air pollution. She has worked in several environmental justice nonprofits and government agencies, and currently she is a transportation equity research fellow at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, where she conducts intersectional transportation policy analysis and research. Dr. Patterson earned her PhD in environmental engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. So Dr. Patterson, it's such a joy and privilege to have you here, and we look forward to just learning. And I would recommend the brief to everyone on this to learn more, even after this webinar.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen. And I hope everyone can see this. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Dr. Reagan Patterson, and I'm an environmental justice consultant. And I'm excited to be a part of this webinar on equity and climate justice in public transit. The title of my talk is Gender and Transit Equity. And this is an image of the Montgomery bus boycott to desegregate buses. On Monday, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, who became the public-facing leader of the boycott. However, it was the organizing efforts of Black women, particularly the planning of the Women's Political Council and the participation of domestic workers who had relied heavily on the bus, that made the boycott successful. And in this image, we see the young ladies are smiling. As one elder Black woman has said, quote, "Since I've been walking, my feet are tired, but my soul's rested." Public transit is a long-standing civil rights issue. Segregated transit was used as a means of controlling the movement of Black people. And today we are still in the struggle for transit equity, which is fundamentally about mobility and mobility justice, which, as Charles Brown of Equitable City says, is really about freedom. Dr. Destiny Thomas of the Thrivance Group states, quote, "Mobility justice is about freedom of movement, freedom to navigate space and place in the absence of racism." So again, this is about freedom. People moving freely and easily in space and place and being able to do so safely. And that requires us acknowledging and addressing racism, white supremacy, patriarchy, ableism, and transphobia in transportation planning that shapes our transportation system. Transportation planning decisions and infrastructure development have systematically created inequitable transportation systems that restrict mobility along race, class, and gender lines. For instance, there is disinvestment in public transit, particularly in buses, to prioritize car-centric planning practices facilitated by investment prioritization of roadways, particularly highways, which have been weaponized as tools of oppression. Following the Federal Aid Highway Act, highway construction and urban renewal inequitably impacted poor communities of color, predominantly Black communities. Highway construction resulted in the demolition, division, and displacement of neighborhoods, as well as the destruction of local economies. And this image is of Atlanta, pre and post construction of highways. And you see the difference, particularly with respect to the state capitol star. And this was happening all over the nation. And to more directly speak to how these investment priorities are not people-centric, I'd like to show a clip from Ramps to Nowhere, a film about how community activism in Seattle actually led to the successful fight against highway expansion there. And I'm going to play just a couple of minutes.
Half of all the highway trust funds generated in states throughout the country are generated on city streets. Maybe these highways are a lucrative source of revenue for the state highway department.
The narrow waist of Seattle makes land here so scarce that we cannot permit additional traffic corridors simply to provide for commuters.
We have here today, however, something that disturbs me greatly. The request for the 3.2 million came from engineers. Where are the people in the city who are responsible for our health, safety, welfare? Now, I wanted to point out to you that you really have the entire rights to determine what transportation goes through Seattle. This is absolutely up to the city council. Citizens have the right to determine what is best for their city.
What do you propose we do today, ma'am? Well,
I propose that you spend
ma'am,
any amount of
excuse me
money
just a
you-
minute, ma'am, please.
And a young fellow with a lot of energy who I'd never heard of before named Larry Gossett organized so that when they had a hearing, I think the hearing was at the Seattle Center, they had about 1,000 people. I think they had to continue the hearing for like 5 evenings.
Now, what we're confronted with now is a representative of the people, our city council, being intimidated by the highway department or blackmailed or whatever you want to call it. You are bringing a major arterial highway into an overcrowded city.
We must stop destroying our city, our lake, and our lives by futile catering to the private automobile. Instead, we must really plan for people and for now, not 1985, or is it 1984? Expect a mess and expect riots if this deal proceeds.
This microphone is closed.
My name is Kathy Howard, and I'm from the Black Panther Party and from the black community. I think that it's very important, first of all, for a black woman to get up and speak. I think it's very important for women to get up and speak, and I think it's very important for people to get up and understand what's going on out here tonight. It's very important for people to understand the priorities that are involved concerning the highways are just a microcosm of the priorities that are pushed forth by this country and pertaining to the welfare of the people. Freeway is one issue that people should be getting organized around, but that's not the main thing. People are talking about cars going to Boston, people talking about cars going to New York. People in the black community cannot eat. When they have a pre-dawn raid on people in Los Angeles, people have got to understand what's going on. And when they come up to 173 20th Avenue and start raiding people in this city, people have really got to start reevaluating what's going on. Not just start reevaluating, start moving on it. And just one more thing, I just want to say, power of the people is greater than the man technology. And our power of the people and seize the time.
So the consequences of the investment prioritization of highways and roadways over transit is automobile dependency and consequently climate change. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the US, accounting for 28%. Car-centric planning increases vulnerability to climate-induced disasters. As we saw with Hurricane Katrina, without a car, there was no escape and people were left stranded. We need an intersectional feminist lens to transition the transportation system to an equitable and sustainable system. Today, I'll draw from the brief I authored for the Women's Environment and Development Organization to discuss the intersections of gender, race, class, climate, and transit. Not only is transit underfunded, but other planning practices, which have historically centered the concerns of white, middle-class, cisgender men, along with issues of affordability and safety, contribute to inequitable transportation systems that hinder mobility and the use of public transit. This brief offers policy recommendations for systematically integrating considerations of gender and the care economy. So planning practices. Single-use zoning, which is rooted in traditional binary gender roles and gender division of labor, separates work, residential, and care areas. This practice increases the distance between care and non-care work, and it increases automobile dependency. However, women have less access to automobiles. 11% of women-headed households do not have access to an automobile, compared to 7% of men-headed households. And this varies by race and ethnicity. For instance, 21% of Black women-headed households do not have access, which is the highest percentage. So then when we look at public transit, which is a low carbon mode, most riders in the US, 55% are women. Yet transit systems don't account for the mobility needs of all genders. Public transit schedules prioritize the traditional male 9-to-5 commute, which creates barriers for part-time, service, informal, and care work. And there is less reliable and less frequent service during off-peak hours. Further, public transit fare policies are around direct commutes. Women have to pay multiple times as they make multiple stops for care, which increases trip costs. On top of all of that, vehicles and facilities are often not designed for care work, whether that's little space for shopping bags, not allowing open strollers, or stops without benches. Now, affordability. Transportation is the second largest household expenditure after housing. It's a financial burden on low-income households, and women experience high poverty rates. 56% of people living in poverty are women, and poverty rates vary by race and ethnicity. Indigenous women have the highest poverty rate at 25%, followed by Black women and Latinas. Gender and racial disparities in poverty rates were exacerbated by the pandemic. This time last year, this news story by CNN was getting a lot of attention. Quote, US employers cut 140,000 jobs in December, according to the latest jobs report. Women accounted for all the losses, losing 156,000 jobs, while men gained 16,000. According to the National Women's Law Center, 154,000 of the 156,000 jobs lost by women that month were lost by Black women. And a major factor is the lack of childcare and other caregiving responsibilities. A recent study found that daycare centers have been more likely to close in Black and Latinx neighborhoods. Further, Black women and Latinas disproportionately work in sectors hardest hit by the pandemic, including paid care work such as healthcare aides. I started this presentation by recognizing the role of domestic workers in the Montgomery bus boycott. And today we must center them and other care workers in pandemic recovery. And now to really get at freedom of movement, we must look at safety. Gender-based harassment and violence are pervasive on public transit. Nationally, 25% of women report experiencing sexual harassment, and occurrences are largely underreported. This issue affects mobility, whereby fear of harassment and violence impedes freedom of movement. Women will modify their travel behavior to avoid fearful settings, like not walking alone or not riding public transit. And this can result in a pink tax on women. Women with the financial ability will use ride-hailing services due to fear and safety concerns. And I know I certainly have taken Lyft at night, despite a short distance to a bus stop or metro station because of safety concerns. And these concerns are made worse by transit stops with poor lighting or long wait times. And all of the issues I've discussed reflect that women's voices are underrepresented in the planning process and decision-making, both in leadership, as shown here, as well as operations and construction. Transportation agencies intentionally centering equity should be reflected in the diversity of the very agencies, which requires measures to hire, retain, promote, and equally pay women and folks from other marginalized groups. So infrastructure and transportation investments that are intersectionally just, that incorporate gender considerations in care work, and that create a sustainable and equitable transportation system would be investments in accessible, frequent, reliable, safe, and free public transit. So how can the recently passed bipartisan infrastructure law or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act help move towards that? The bipartisan infrastructure law does significantly increase public transit funding. However, it does not fund public transit equally to roads and bridges. Transit parity has gender, racial, and economic implications. Also, Executive Order 14008 established the Justice 40 Initiative, which aims to deliver 40% of overall benefits of federal investments in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities. The Biden-Harris administration recently released a statement on how it's working to implement that commitment with the bipartisan infrastructure law. However, the Green New Deal Network's Thrive agenda advocates for 40% of investments to go to frontline communities. Next, transportation and care investment should be linked to undo the single-use zoning and enable easier travel between non-care and care work. And the next two recommendations focus on how public transit investments can improve design and service. To address previously mentioned challenges and barriers to ridership, transit agencies should invest in things like vehicles with designated stroller areas, benches, working elevators, as Janet Mills mentioned, sufficient lighting and real-time information at waiting areas, as well as increased unarmed civilian transit staff for safety. And with regard to service, transit agencies should focus on more frequent and reliable service all day, prioritizing off-peak hours. A recent Wired article titled "Public Transit Systems Refocus on Their Care Riders" describes how, due to the pandemic, several agencies are shifting away from commuter routes and targeting low-income riders and riders of color with more weekend and more frequent off-peak service. And so that same article goes on to discuss agencies that are eliminating fares. You all are probably thinking, I just saw this slide. But in terms of freedom of movement, we need to emphasize the free and accessible, frequent, reliable, safe, and free public transit. Often folks aspire to accessible, frequent, and reliable, but freedom of movement requires sufficient investment to enable free. You'll hear next from Nancy Smith from the Office of Boston Mayor. And Boston's recently elected Mayor Wu extended Boston's fare-free bus services. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley reintroduced the Freedom to Move Act, which would provide grants to support fare-free transit and require grantees to decriminalize fare evasion. The policies recognize that free transit increases access for low-income riders and simultaneously addresses increased costs for multi-stop trips. The Freedom to Move Act also recognizes that Black bodies and their mobility have always been criminalized, codified from slavery to the Black codes to public transit to now, particularly with inequitable fare enforcement, an attempt to control. Transit equity requires both fare-free and decriminalization to empower the freedom of movement. And lastly, infrastructure and transportation investments will create good high-wage jobs. A just and equitable transition to a carbon-free mobility future requires workplaces that are inclusive of women and people of color and that have opportunities for advancement to ensure diverse voices in leadership. This picture is from the Oregon Tradeswomen webpage, and Oregon Tradeswomen is the co-chair of the National Task Force on Tradeswomen's Issues, whose framework for promoting equity and inclusion for women and people of color working in the trades on publicly funded infrastructure projects, a long framework title, calls for explicit workforce participation goals and workplaces free from discrimination and harassment to not recreate oppressive industries. Just 4% of construction laborers and 2% of construction equipment operators are women. Further, for women and caregivers to be able to work, there need to be family-friendly policies like family sustaining wages, paid family leave, and universal childcare. The Build Back Better Act would start to address this with investments in affordable childcare, as well as in affordable care for elders and people with disabilities. Importantly, these strategies to systematically integrate considerations of gender in the care economy must be locally adapted through decision-making processes that involve all genders. And while this presentation focused on women, the brief did discuss and policies need to involve transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people to fully make visible the mobility needs of those often invisibilized. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reagan Patterson. That was Yeah, I suspect many of you who are listening who have just heard that right now are itching to read the brief, and so much information in terms of giving us historical context about the racist practices in our country and the policies and the implications today that continue, right? And how you're speaking of the pink tax, and that we need to not only think about accessibility, frequent, reliable, safe, but also free public transit. Thank you also for giving us some guidance in terms of policy areas that we can focus on, and we'll come back to that in the Q&A. So thank you for that framing. We're going to now move on in terms of Transit Equity Day. We have two phenomenal speakers who have been both working to advance transit equity in their locations nationally and locally. First is Bakari Height. And Marianne, we can't see your screen. I think it's on pause right now, so we can unpause. Bakari Height is the co-founder and president of MARTA Army in Atlanta, Georgia, where he dedicated his work to shine a brighter light on the equitable transit across such a sprawled out Sun-Belt city. His organization allows users to transit to empower themselves to better their system through clever tactical urbanism projects like adding real-time arrivals info at bus stops. Well, that'd be great. I need that in my area. Crowdfunding over $10,000 for trash cans at bus stops, and volunteer efforts that connect users with the transit agency during the Interstate 85 bridge collapse. So Bakari will be leading us in understanding what Transit Equity Day is about, and he is a transit planner also with the Labor Network for Sustainability. And Nancy Smith, B. Smith, is Program Manager for Community Resilience and Engagement at Office of Public Health Preparedness, Boston Public Health Commission, located in Boston, Massachusetts. She's responsible for developing community relationships in support of emergencies preparedness and community resilience in close coordination with other public health departments in Boston Emergency Management Services. It's such a privilege to have both of you really give us a better sense of Transit Equity Day and what has been going on and how we can be involved. So Bakari and Nancy, I'm going to hand it over to you both.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you all for inviting me onto this. It is an absolute honor to speak on such a momentous occasion that we definitely hold near and dear to our hearts every year. So thank you for all. I have just a really short informal presentation, nothing too serious, about Transit Equity Day. And we're doing something a little different where we're doing a live stream component of this, but we want to be able to show you all and give you all the opportunity to show what's going on in your community so we can work to fix it. And because I was just recently in Philly, and I'm a huge fan of the show Abbott Elementary. If you haven't watched that, it's a really very funny show, and they put all these little Philly slang. So this is Bakari Height John. Next slide. Like I said, this is going to be really simple. The who, what, why, where, how, and when. I'm really simple. I don't really get into too many details. But next slide. So I'll get into the who. Who am I? Who are we? And who are you? Next slide. So as mentioned, my name is Bakari Height. I'm a transit organizer with the Labor Network for Sustainability. And I'm also a transit planner by trade. So I've worked within many public-private nonprofits within public transit, some including City of Atlanta, the Atlanta Beltline, Dallas Air Rapid Transit in Dallas, Texas. I've most recently going to be working soon with the City of Baltimore for their public transit and transit planning. So, but I've worked all over and I've seen a lot of things, and it's really called me to do what I've been doing for the past 10 years while I've been working through all of this, and that's transit advocacy. So I found Labor Network for Sustainability, and it's a really wonderful organization that really wants to bridge the gap between labor as well as with sustainability. So it's really wonderful organization. I've got to do a lot of amazing projects within my short time here. Next slide. And you also may recognize me if you're in the transportation sphere of the co-founder of MARTA Army. And this is one of our many pictures. I think this is when we did Transportation Camp DC, but it was, the nonprofit was born out of this idea of the users being able to empower themselves to better this system. We're the ones that ride it every day. We're the ones that use it every day. We're the ones that see every single issue. Why not put the power to us? So, and Elizabeth read off a lot of the amazing projects we've done. And I'll tell you about a project that we're starting to wrap up, which was born out of Transit Equity Day. Next slide. Who are you? I've seen a lot of locations in the comments. I've been watching all of you. It's been wonderful that you all have such a wide representation around the country. And that these are the kind of voices that we need, because we can't all just assume that transit is just a Northeast thing or a West Coast thing, that there are a lot of really wonderful areas that we can really expand transit and where we really can get these stories told about what's going on and what we need to fix about our infrastructure. Next slide. And of course, the what. It's the whole reason why we're here today, is we want to be able to discuss what transit equity is, and especially why Transit Equity Day is of such importance to us. Next slide. And this goes down to what is transit equity? Well, I can explain it and show you better than I can tell you. So you see two pictures here. You see the picture on the left shows what looks to be a train station, and you basically have all of the elements of a train station. You have a platform, you have signs telling you where the elevator is, you have real-time arrival information right in front of you that it tells you also if there are any delays. You have a covering over it, so if it's snowing or if it's raining, then you have protection. Then you look at the right side. Huge bed of kudzu, which is the definite scenario which you'll see at probably 80% of the bus stops in places like Atlanta and in other cities and around the country, where it's even worse. I even had a picture that I took in Dallas of a bus stop that was off of a freeway on-ramp. So, you get these scenarios, but this is where transit equity comes into play, because you'll get a lot of these transit agencies that will play up in some scenarios where you will get stations like these in certain parts of town, and then you'll get stations or stops like on the right side in other parts of town. But it's all about the mobility and the accessibility and where we're putting a lot of the resources that we're going to too. So we want to be able to focus on getting everybody the same level of service. So if the north side of Atlanta has a wonderful level of service, we want to be able to do and implement the same thing on the south side of Atlanta, where you do have more people of color, you do have more zero-car households, and you do have the same level of access that someone with a car would be able to access this. Next up, or next slide. So our solution for this was, we were introduced by a dear friend of ours during a book club that we read. And she introduced us to Labor Network for Sustainability, who was hosting this event for Transit Equity Day. So we thought, yeah, this would be a wonderful project, and especially because we were just finishing up reading Better Buses, Better Cities by Stephen Higashida of Transit Center. And there was a chapter in there about a woman that was charged a felony with vehicular manslaughter when she tried to cross a busy stretch of road in suburban Atlanta. And unfortunately, one of her children passed away from the injuries, and the driver was impaired, but she was punished. So that shows you right there where we had a huge equity issue, because not only was this a Black woman who was trying to get to the bus to get to her family home, but that the courts weren't even in her favor as far as what this such a heinous tragedy that happened, and but still with her. So we wanted to be able to really hone in on the issues that pedestrians, especially pedestrians that take the bus and take transit, have to face. So we created this project called Operation Bus Stop Census. And essentially what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a census in the same year that the US Census was going on, but we wanted to create a census for bus stops, because this is usually a forgotten part of transit that, bus riders are just as needing of these amenities as people who take the train. And with Atlanta, that we have a much larger bus system than we do a train system. So most of the people who do need to take transit are usually going to take the bus. So we unveiled this at the center of our station, which is 5 Points. And we had a presentation featuring a lot of our major partners in Metro Atlanta, like Georgia Stand Up. Atlanta Bicycle Coalition, Sierra Club, Partnership for Southern Equity. We had a myriad of wonderful partners to go in on this project with us, and we're really thankful for it. We took the whole year to kind of regroup because this is also the same year that COVID started. So we went from encouraging folks to actually do this in person to going onto Google Maps and actually looking at what the stop was. And we recorded everything from the conditions of the sidewalk to the lighting to are there crosswalks, is it ADA accessible? And we compiled it all into this huge report after we stopped collecting the data that we're going to be unveiling this year at Transit Equity Day. So, and this is also a good reason to do based off of the digital divide, because a lot of folks still didn't have smartphones. So in addition to like one of the projects we did with Operation Timely Trip, this is also going into the place for allowing people to go in and record things if they didn't have a smartphone or if they didn't have anything that they needed to get to the stops. Next slide. So why do it? Next slide. Well, of course, we wanted to honor Ms. Rosa Parks, and not many people know that she really led a charge for young activism. I mean, she was fairly young at the time of the Montgomery bus boycott. And a lot of the folks that participate in a lot of our meetings and a lot of our initiatives are fairly young, and especially that join onto this. So we wanted to do this to merge local grassroots organizations and labor units and labor unions to showcase the inequities with transit while honoring people like Rosa Parks, people like Claudette Cloven, people like all of the groups that have worked tirelessly to make sure that people are aware that the conditions that people are using to just to get to work, just to get to medical appointments are substandard. So we want to be able to bring that to a larger light and also give you all the power to show us better than we could. I mean, yes, I'm a transit planner by trade, but I don't know every single place in the country. I've been to a lot of places, but there's more that you all can tell. There's more of all of your experiences that we want to be able to showcase. And that's why Transit Equity Day is a thing. Next slide. This is an example of an action that a lot of our groups that participate in Transit Equity Day do. This is someone who reserved a seat on the bus for the day of February 4th. Like you saw in Atlanta, we had a rally and we invited our partners. One of our partners in South Carolina is doing a pancake social based off of a recipe that Rosa Parks did. And we're actually going to be sharing that amongst others who want to be able to donate and give back to folks, because essentially what they're doing is they're raising money to feed the hospice population in Charleston. So it's a wonderful way to give back, but also to give awareness to something that's going on, because you know, with groups like this, they come from a lot of these cities where transit's in the power structure of a lot of folks that don't use transit and don't understand the impact that it has on people that have to use it as their main mode of transportation. So, and we also have an organizing toolkit, which I can provide links to later, where we have, if you'd like to make a declaration to your local government or your transit agency. Atlanta's currently doing that now with our brand new city council members who are mostly pro-transit. And also another idea is holding a ride along, and exactly to what I just said last time. Get these folks on the bus, get these folks, especially the ones in power. Next slide. Another reason why it's building a network. Like I said, we're attracting younger folks. We're strengthening our labor relations with our TWU and our ATU partners, but also within a lot of the environmental justice groups like the NAACP, Black Hip Hop Caucus, and definitely a lot of our partners within the Sierra Club. Next slide. And going into how this makes an impact, next slide. Like, it builds power. Where last year we got Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg to recognize Transit Equity Day. That was big. This year we want him to make a statement. We've even had talks with Congressman Hank Johnson, who championed the Stronger Communities Through Better Transit bill last year. and even we've discussed this with the staffers with Raphael Warnock's office. But it also creates a larger platform where we can provide the space for you all to speak out on this. And that, and especially what I want to do with the Transit Equity Network is I want to make it informal and inviting to as many people as possible. The main reason of why we want to do this is we want to be able to be open and inviting to invite you all to tell your stories so we can figure out these solutions for it. Next slide. And of course, when that's all is happening, next slide. Friday, February 4th, 2022. And we will be live streaming the event on YouTube. So if you'd like more information about how you can be included in the live stream, I'll have my contact information at the end of the slides. But it'll be from 12 p.m. Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern, live stream on the Labor Network for Sustainability YouTube channel. Next slide. Well, and like I said, that's all my contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at bakari@laborforsustainability.org, and I can put it in the chat as well. And as well as if you'd like to learn about any more projects that MARTA Army's done, our website is www.martaarmy.org. And that is it.
Thanks so much, Bakari, for all that information. So many ways we can get involved. I'm gonna bounce it now to Ms. Nancy.
Okay, well, I do have to make an announcement. First of all, Elizabeth, I've actually gotten a new job. And so after 21 years of being over at the Boston Public Health Commission, I'm now working in the mayor's office over in the Office of Emergency Management. So I didn't get a chance to get that, guys, to you. And I don't know exactly why everything is a little muffled here on the PowerPoint. As we say, there's too much information, but it ended up being a vision board originally. And so I think when I converted it over, you'll see some of the things that are overlapping each other. But one of the things that I wanted to focus in on was what makes you serve? What makes you so passionate about why you do these things? I do have to first say thank you for some folks back in Atlanta, because I am from Atlanta, and I do consider Atlanta still as my home. I want to just say my first pastor was S.A. Baker at Mount Vernon Baptist Church. And my current pastor is Reverend Turner. And I like to also say that I've been a member of the Mount Vernon Baptist Church my whole entire life, because my mother was pregnant while she was attending this church. And she's also now a mother of the church for Mount Vernon Baptist Church. And our church is kind of famous because it was one of the churches that was asked to move in order for the Mercedes-Benz to be built. So, but it's all good. We're still in Southwest Atlanta, and things are great. So what you're looking at right now for me was what makes you so passionate to go and volunteer? Bakari mentioned a lot about getting involved. Getting involved means that folks have to actually have something that they're passionate about. And I know that your organization, Liz, the UMW, the women and men that are involved with this are very passionate about climate. They're very passionate about transportation. They're very passionate about equity. But getting folks out to actually participate on those days, sometimes you have to pull people, make those phone calls. But what we want to just really talk about is like, what really allows us to go out and volunteer. So for me, I started to just look at what made me be who I am, and a vision board, looking at who Nancy is in a chapter 1, climate. What made me actually become concerned about climate is the pecan trees that never came back in our family land that we have in Georgia. We're still very blessed to have that. Going back and looking at my ancestors, we were able to go back to 1768 to Jubal Mitchell, who was the first person to purchase this land. We had 1,200 acres of land at the time that got reduced during the Jim Crow down to 500, but our family still owns this. But we would actually go down to my mom's land every summer. Well, we go all the time, but in the summer they would take us down there because they were teaching us about the love of the land and what does that actually mean. And I actually became so interested in the well water. and why one well was closed and they had to spend money to get another well, and why was the hogs not allowed to use this things. So there were all these things that actually fomented me into thinking about climate. And I want people to take the time to think about what's in your own backyard, in your own life, in your own existence that drives you to think about climate. I have a little note here about ACCO, which I really want to follow up with everyone, because this is an opportunity for people to get accredited. And I will follow up with you, Liz, on maybe some people who would possibly want to do this accreditation. I was able to get, I think, 22 scholarships for people a year and a half ago to actually do this program for free. So I've already talked to the founder, and he's willing to discuss about the possibilities of having that for your organization and those who are interested. So we're going to take a look at transportation in the past. As you guys can see, I have some pictures here of, okay, there we go. Oh, thank you. Okay, perfect. I have some pictures here of, you recognize the face. We have Dr. Martin Luther King and we have Rosa Parks. And what does that actually mean in transportation equity? We all know that it was in Montgomery, Alabama, the boycotts. We know that there were people holding hands who represented African Methodist Episcopal. We know that there were people who were Baptists. We knew there were people who did not even have a slated religion, but they knew what this justice was incorrect and something needed to change. So we're going to fast forward because I know I'm short for time here. And we're just going to take a look at present day and what that looks like now on a federal level. I wrote some names down here because I think we got a winning spade hand. If you guys play cards, if you take a look at that federal listing of folks that we got, we need to be knocking on doors. I mentioned this about a year ago. I don't think that we could ever have the level of folks that are in place right now that we can make some changes with transportation, equity, and justice across the board. I narrowed down to looking at some of the things that are going on in my favorite cities, of course, Atlanta, and also where I live now, Boston. Looking at the things that are happening in Atlanta with our new mayor, who literally was also a part of the transportation, I think, committee. Bakari, there you go. Okay. And also looking at the champions of, there's some funny things that you guys will see there as my little notes about, in order to become a mayor, in the last 3 times, your mom needs to be named Sylvia, which is all of our former mayors, like their mom's name involved in Sylvia in Atlanta. That was just a little note to myself, a joke to reference that. But looking at what's going on in Boston. So you can switch over to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about some champion moves that have been made by our former mayor, Kim Janey, and our new mayor, Mayor Wu. Mayor Wu, Kim Janey originally allowed for free bus service, which was the number 28 was a pilot. And that went on for a few, like I think it was about a month. And there was such a big roar for everyone being so excited about it and using the buses that they extended it out. On Mayor Wu's first day in office, she actually signed signed a document to have, I forget the amount of money it was, 1.8, I think it's 1. Well, it's a lot of money. Let me just put it away. So we literally now in Boston have 2 years of free bus service on the 23, 28, and 29. Now this was a clear, direct hit for racial equity. And the reason why a lot of folks were like, well, why were those buses selected? And my bus service should have been selected. But what they did was they took the data and they looked at the neighborhoods that were the most vulnerable. And I really hope that going forward, other municipalities will start looking at how they can shift their money into doing some of the things that are being done in Boston. I have some quotes up here from Mayor Wu and also from Mayor Dickens, who at the time made a statement about free public transit. So looking at these local politicians, that you can start this process. You can always point and say, hey, listen, Boston's doing it. Oh, look, they found some money. Why can't we do some shifting here? So I think there's opportunities of policy, activism, but you've got to be able to want to do this. You've got to have a passion for being able to say, I want to send off a letter. I want to do these things and try to partner with organizations in your community. And if you don't have one, call LNS. We can probably, I'm sure Bakari will, he has a master plan. So he will get you connected with the folks that need you to volunteer. I know that for sure. One of the things that has been exciting, and I'm going to put my public health hat on right now, was some of the social determinants of health. So with COVID, when the vaccine and testing started kind of, the wave was going up in Boston, they started looking at locations that actually needed to be equitable. And if you go and take a look at some of the largest sites that are being used, they're all on public transportation lines. They are clearly making sure, like the JP, I have the Orange Line, that's our transportation, the bus lines. And yesterday, they opened up one of the largest one that's right in Nubian Station and Dudley Station. So there's many ways that social determinants of health can be overlapped during this time of when we need to have COVID testing, making sure that the bus lines are and the locations that people are going to are directly in line. You don't want to have to get off and walk 5 miles, or, I'm just exaggerating with how many miles, but, you want it to be convenient. And if there are some buses that that can be utilized so that people can get to those I thank you so much about the time. So I really wanted to just wrap up real quick because I'm looking down here at the bottom with some of the quotes. I'm going to leave this with everyone to just think about. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You only need a heart full of grace and soul generated by love. Everyone, think about what you can do for the 4th of February for Rosa Parks Day. We in Boston, we have a proclamation that will be happening. We also have another event that's going to be happening on the 18th of February, where we're going to be showing a free streaming of movie of the Rosa Parks story. So we'll make sure we get all that information out to Liz, and it's actually going to be on the website for the LNS. And so I'm going to just close out. Thank you so much. Sorry I had to rush.
This is so phenomenal. Thank you so much, Ms. Nancy, in terms of just inviting us in terms of the why, right? Why do we do it? And thank you for sharing your vision board and the invitation for us to do that, and grounding us in examples of Boston, other location, and how we can get involved as well. I love your final chapter, right? That we can all be involved in this process. Using and lifting up Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote as well. So what does that mean for us as United Methodist Women and women of faith and friends? Well, Bakari had noted this and others had noted it as well. So join Transit Equity Day. So if you haven't penciled it in already, February 4th, 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be online. Bakari showed how easy it could be. You could even create if you're really good at drawing, your own Rosa Parks, and something else. You could write words or Transit Equity Day, and an origami rose. And one of our colleagues is actually Alana Walls is actually putting together a video in terms of how you can create your own origami rose. You can participate or organize in an action in your area. And online, there are various links that are available through the Transit Equity Day network page. And Marianne, if you could drop that. and share the word about it in your newsletter, on your church bulletin, in church, do a testimony during church, your UMW gathering, write an op-ed. The Transit Equity Network actually just organized an op-ed writing training, so we can share a link of that as well. And join the movement. You're hearing this, you're being energized, and you're wondering, okay, are you asking just for February 4th? No, the invitation is the continued effort and engagement to seek equity in our communities, right? So it's not once a year, it's a regular practice. And something you can do very concretely that we will invite us for you to do is reach out to your senators right now to pass the Build Back Better Act. As Dr. Patterson noted, there's so many connections in terms of the benefits of the Build Back Better Act. I just want to note that Ms. Rosa Parks was an incredible woman of faith. She was a member and a leader within the AME Church, so within our Methodist Wesleyan movement. And she said this: "I thought the Lord would give me the strength to endure whatever I had to face. God did away with all my fears. It was time for someone to stand up, or in my case, sit down. I refused to move." And so we have our mothers and foremothers, leaders before us who have created ways and models of how we can engage in that work of faithful witness and justice. And for such a time as this, God continues to call us. We have a brief moment for Q&A. I wanted to just highlight a few things. There was a question, just a clarification on what the pink tax is. So Dr. Patterson, if you can speak about that. And also Dr. Patterson, if you can speak more about why women would not engage or use the transit system, if you could speak more about that. Rachel had given some comments around that. So whether it's disabilities and other access, et cetera. And so that's what Dr. Patterson and others, if you can just comment in terms of as there's the Build Back Better Act that has been passed, the infrastructure funding, and there are opportunities, there's so much that we can do, right? And but there's so many other narratives around where money should go, right? So how can women of faith and others discern in their communities what to advocate for around transit equity? Because some may say, oh, clean energy, we really don't need electric cars. We could have clean vehicles that are run by natural gas, that's cleaner, et cetera, right? And so they're making this argument. So there's going to be a lot of greenwashing. How do we cut through that? And how do we know how to advocate effectively that's in solidarity? So maybe Dr. Patterson, if you can start us off and then others can comment.
Yeah, so great question. For the pink tax, it's where you often out of fear and safety concerns, women will substitute their travel mode to more expensive modes. So for instance, at nighttime, out of fear of walking to a transit stop or riding transit, women with financial ability will use ride-hailing services instead, which we know is pretty expensive relative to public transit. And so that cost of having to do that mode shift, that extra cost, a study showed that in New York, women spend up to $50 extra a month with this pink tax because of out of fear and safety concerns. And so that adds up. And so that is the pink tax on women. And so someone else brought up a great point around even just the walk to transit. And so, yes, the fear of safety in walks. And so that gets again at the infrastructure and transportation investments, having safe environments, not having desolate settings, having lighting, having safe street infrastructure to even walk. Are there sidewalks? And we know that there are racial and ethnic disparities in access to even to infrastructure, particularly also for people with disabilities. Are there the curbs that allow access for wheelchairs, for instance? And so a lot of various intersecting concerns when we talk about fear, safety, and access.
Thank you so much for commenting on that. And with regards to just, and I think you were mentioning that as well in terms of the connection, in terms of what are reasons, other reasons maybe, that women may not use public transit. If you want to speak around that, and I think you've spoken a bit already. And then others, if you want to chime in specifically around solutions and how we can move forward.
Yeah, so in addition to the fear and safety concerns, this gets more at just the infrastructure itself. And so are there public transit stations with benches, for instance? Are the transit stops even accessible? Are there sidewalks available? Can people who are differently abled access these transit stops? And so a lot of various, again, intersecting issues to even get to a transit stop, to then be able to use transit. And then the stop design itself, is it conducive to elderly, for instance, with benches and other accommodations? And then is there real-time information so people aren't waiting there for a long time? Is there accurate information on display of when the next bus will come? So a lot of needs to consider around the design of transit stops as well as our street infrastructure.
Thank you. That's perfect. I think about Bakari, you said, the people who are riding it have the most knowledge. So, we should be heard, right? And that it's not people who are just doing the transit planning, et cetera. So I am mindful of time. I just want to give an opportunity for our speakers. I'll start with who started. So we'll do Janet, and then Reagan, and then Bakari, Nancy, in terms of any last words that you have for UMW as we close out.
Oh boy, we learned a lot today, and we've taken the baton, and now it's time to put it into action in words. I want to highlight, or let me just say, blow up even more, the security factor for women, and which Professor Patterson mentioned. I really feel that this is concerned also. I'll share with you, restrooms. Safe restrooms are important too. That's one area. And clean with supplies, which would be very surprising if there were supplies. Unfortunately, like me, if I travel to the doctor's office, that's a 2-hour trip by train and bus. I do need to use public restrooms. And if it's not clean with supplies, I'm in trouble. So that's something else, a little caveat there to add on to our concerns. Definitely benches and the shelters are very important. In Philadelphia, we have more shelters without benches, and because they're concerned about the vulnerable population using the benches for as a resting place, overnight resting place. So these are some things we do need to address, and but this is our way of life, that we need to deal with solutions. And I thank you for all the other minds that are here to let's work together as a coalition to resolve some of these concerns. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Ms. Janet.
For me, I guess the closing thought is that transportation really intersects with every aspect of the lived experience. I really appreciated the opening video around how transit intersects with domestic violence, which is something that some people may not think about. Or during COVID, we see how access to transit really has affected people's ability to access healthcare and vaccines, and just even the ability to ride transit. And so thinking about all of the integral ways that transit impacts our lives, and then thinking about all of the considerations around transit and transportation at large. There's so many opportunities for people to engage in advocacy in this work because it intersects with every aspect of our lives. And so if there's really any issue that you're passionate about, most likely it's going to relate somehow to transit. So I just would encourage people to really start looking at transit holistically. Often transportation kind of goes to the sideline, like, oh, I need to get to the grocery store, but we don't think about how we get to the grocery store. And so really thinking about how it impacts our own lives and how we can be involved in this work.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Patterson. Bakari.
Oh, thank you all so much for allowing me to speak. I see a lot of power in this room, and just with the sheer numbers of people that are on this call. Yes, I encourage you all to join any kind of local civic organization that you can. Had I known that early on when I was in school, I would have become mayor of Atlanta by now. That's where they're involved, and that's how Martyr Army became a thing. There's a lot of power in numbers, and especially when you all band together and like Nancy said, like you have an absolute passion for this. We found these groups that have absolute passion for public transit, and that's why our work is continuing, and especially with everywhere I go. Shout out to Philly. I've done amazing work up there with the Philly Transit Riders Union, and I'll be continuing to work up there. Because they're passionate folks up there, especially here in Maryland as well. So yeah, please go out and join and definitely register your events with Labor Network Sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks, Bakari. Ms. Nancy.
All right, so I'm just gonna round this out with knowing that Dr. King was known for the drum major for justice. And we've always said that Rosa Parks was the mother of civil rights and the first lady. I've always had my vision, and I changed her position because I figured I would be like in a band with Dr. King. So I want you to think about what position you're going to play in this band that he has. There's all kinds of positions. You have section leaders, equipment, handlers, you have the majorettes, you have the steppers. Now we're going to go with the HBCUs. You don't get to see them at all the places, but I want you to think about what position would you have? Because for me, because this was my vision and my own vision board, I actually gave Rosa Parks a new title. I actually made her associate drum major for me, being a woman. And I see a lot of drum majors in this audience right now, in this virtual audience that we have. So continue to keep doing the work, continue to keep lifting up your brothers and sisters in this work that we're doing, and make sure you take care of yourself, self-care. That's all I want to just close out and say every day is a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. What a gift. And we're going to close out. After we do our closing, we'll give some announcements, but our closing prayer is by Judy, Miss Judy McGugan, and she is now retired after 20 years in telecommunications as a systems architect at Bell Labs. And she was a Stephen minister in Illinois and later became a Stephen leader and organized the Stephen Ministry program at her Colorado church. She's currently serving as Social Action Coordinator for Broomfield United Methodist Women and is on the Legislative Action Team for Mountain Sky Conference Creation Justice Team. And she and her husband, John, have 2 married daughters and 2 grandchildren. And she enjoys traveling, bridge, golf, theater, and special time with her family. So we're so glad you are here to close us out and send us forward, Judy.
Thanks for that introduction. And please join me in our closing prayer. Abba, Mother, Father, Spirit, God, we thank you for the inspiring words of Janet, Shivani, Reagan, Bakari, and Nancy today. They've opened our eyes to so many of the inequities that exist in our transit systems. We ask you today to bless all the upcoming February 4th Transit Day activities. And as a Colorado person, I come to you with a heavy heart as we remember thousands of people who are still dealing with the aftermath of the Marshall Fire that spread over 6.5 square miles near my home in Colorado a few weeks ago. We're comforted by the knowledge that you, Father, are always with us and that you grieve these losses as much as we do. Scientists tell us that the climate crisis is increasing the severity of natural disasters like this. They say that the Marshall Fire was not a fluke, because the climate crisis is a threat multiplier. We're going to see even more extreme natural disasters around the world. They're becoming more unpredictable, and of course, they're all exacerbated by rising levels of greenhouse gases. Abba, please open people's eyes to see the reality of a changing climate. Guide us to work together to build a society that acts quickly to prevent this crisis and supports all of the people who are impacted by it. We ask this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that prayer. And sending us forth. One of the things that I want to just remind us is that our work continues, and I'm just going to go through announcements for those of you who want to stay on, but our next event will be taking place not on every third Wednesday of the month as we have it, but in February, we're actually going to move that to Thursday and Friday instead. We're partnering with many organizations for the Breathe Again, Healthy Air is Healthy Care training of the trainers. So Nancy had asked us, why do we do what we do? Right? And sometimes we need that training so we can train other people and share and invite others. And so we're going to be doing a training with and a content training, especially with mothers and others, GIPL, North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, Elders Climate Action. And we will be looking at how climate change is impacting our health and actually learning about a particular script that mothers and others put together that you can do in your own groups. So we hope that this will be a training that'll be helpful. And we'll also do breakout groups where you get to meet folks from your location as well. And it's going to be interfaith and interorganizational. So it's United Methodist Women meeting folks from Georgia Interfaith Power and Light or Elders Climate Action, right? And saying, oh, I'm from Alabama as well. Let's put on something together. So it'll be for coalition building relationships, learning about it, and we'll be debriefing how you'll go through that presentation with us and learn, and we'll give you tools and techniques about like how you can do that in your own context. And we're focusing specifically on the Southeast, but all are welcome. So we know that the Southeast is disproportionately impacted. Communities of color are getting the least amount of funding in the Southeast around climate, especially at the state level. So we want to put some energy there, but all are welcome. And for those who are outside of the Southeast, we'll have other breakout groups that might be a bit more regional, but a great time to connect. So please register. And one of the new things we're doing is we will be starting monthly working groups. So we've been having these monthly webinars, but these working groups are really an opportunity for, at any level, to say, hey, I'm planning something, or I need ideas. And we're going to be talking about, well, how can we promote that and work at that at our various levels and strategize together. Well, some of the time we'll be giving some national updates as well. So I invite you to fill out the doodle poll and join us for those meetings. We'll start in February. And if you haven't done so already, please encourage your UMW at all the levels to prioritize climate justice. And we know some of you are already going to be doing activities. Please share what you're doing. We would love to hear, send your photos, etc., about what is happening. And I did want to note our methane, the EPA is still continuing to receive public comments around methane. If you didn't receive this email, let us know and we can forward this to you. But Cynthia Reeves, our UMW Vice President, her grandson was in a place where they had methane, oil, natural gas tanks that were just out. They fixed it, but that impacted her grandchild, right? And it impacts so many communities throughout the United States. So public comments, you can submit it until January 30th. If you don't get our regular updates, and we know some of you may be new to here or just got the invite, please sign up for updates as well and keep in touch. And finally, go to that resource that Dr. Patterson authored. It is a great resource. Please share that with your fellow UMW and consider doing that as one of your unit or conference or district activities. Again, thank you all so much for being with us. We know we ran about almost 15 minutes over. So blessings to you. We'll stick around. We know folks want to sometimes talk and chat or have more questions, but we'll be here. But thank you all again and blessings to you.